Hey guys, today I'm going to use my Sculpt brush from my Sculpt brush set on Gumroad to quickly block in this painting of a foot. Now I've started off with a sketch that has clearly defined planes, and this is really going to go a long way in helping us lay in colors so that it immediately has volume. I've done this sketch over a reference photo whose levels I've adjusted in order to exaggerate the highlights and the shadows, and this just helped me see a little bit more clearly some of the planes in this foot. If you want to see how I did that, make sure to click the link in the description. Okay, so I'm going to take this sketch and we'll just paint it down here, and we'll take these two layers and bring those up for our reference, something like that. Now, I really like this method because it helps me separate stages of decision making. We've started with a clear sketch with plane changes. Next, we'll move on to massing in major forms, and then we'll move on to blending. And you'll see how a form emerges very, very quickly. So I'll take my sketch layer and just drop the opacity a little bit. And I like to paint underneath my sketch layer first. Again, I don't want to think about the form while I'm painting, one decision at a time. At some point, I'll merge those two together and just paint right over everything. So I'll just call this paint. And I'm going to be using Clip Studio's default oil paint flat brush and then my Sculpt brush in order to blend those things. So we'll start with the oil paint flat brush. Go ahead and open up our color wheel. And instead of picking colors right from the photo, I'm just going to pick something organically from the color wheel. I like to do this a little more because it helps my color picking skills, and I find I just get something a little more original anyway. So let's just start with something like that, and let's just do a quick block in. Now I'm not even going to worry about staying in the lines, and this is one of the reasons why I like painting underneath the line work first. We can always vignette this later. It's a very organic process here. Okay, I'm hitting the Option key or the Alt key if you're on Windows, and that's going to grab the color picker. So even though I'm on this color, you can see that I can very quickly just grab the local color. So there's our color. And the next thing I'm going to do is maybe bring in some of these shadow areas. So I'm going to take this color and just drop the value and desaturate just a little bit. And that's going to cool this color down just a little bit as well. I've also mapped my brush size to the front rocker button on my Wacom stylus in case you're wondering. You can check out one of my other tutorials on how to do that. So I'm just going to quickly block this in here. You can see already my planar drawing is helping me a lot. Okay, so we got those shadow values in. Let's go ahead and just maybe drop some of these in this way. Okay, good. Okay, I'm going to grab that local color again, and this time we'll do the highlights. We'll go up and then desaturate. So remember, whenever an object is being hit by light, the color desaturates. And whenever it's being removed from the light, in the case of shadows, colors are also desaturating. So I'm picking that local color, brightening it, and then desaturating it. And we'll just maybe hit this big plane up here. This is kind of facing that light. Something like that. I'll make this a little bit smaller so we can see that toe there. Let's use that levels adjusted reference photo just so we can see those forms a little more clearly. Okay, you know, I think I grayed up that mid-tone a little bit too much, but this is why I really love this method, is because I haven't really invested that much time into this. So I'm just going to pick that color again, and instead of desaturating it for the mid-tones, I'm just going to darken it. And then we'll desaturate those shadows a little more in a bit. So we'll quickly do that. And in fact, I always find that as the more I just paint over what I've already painted, the richer, more layered my painting gets. So good. We'll just block that in. And now I'm noticing these even darker areas. So picking that color, going even darker, and maybe just now I'm starting to desaturate just a little bit. So I hit that little corner there. There's a little turn. Maybe something like that. Again, I'm not worried about blending yet. I'm just blocking in these major forms. Maybe something like that. I think I'm going to do the same thing with maybe this mid-tone. I'm going to saturate that up just a little bit more. Bring that. Something like this. I really love how the oil paint flat brush kind of naturally blends anyway. Again, so I'm using my Option or Alt key to just pick that local color and just kind of really yeah, I'm already starting to sculpt things together, right? Just with my oil paint flat brush. Good. I'm going to get a little more of these reds in here. So I'm just going to grab that color, shift this over to red, and without even really saturating it anymore, I'm just giving it a little bit more of that warmth. Just real subtle stuff. Picking that color, making it a little bit red. Picking that color, making it redder. Maybe something like that. Grabbing that color, making that redder. It's real easy to go oversaturated too early. Okay, and let's grab some of this mid-tone and just kind of red that up a little bit. Okay, maybe something like that. Now, as soon as I turn off my sketch layer, you can already see we're starting to get that, you know, the idea of these volumes. Good. I'm going to duplicate my sketch layer just to have it as reference, and I'll just say duplicate layer, turn that off, and I'm going to grab these two and crunch them together. So we'll go to the menu, and now I'm saying merge selected layers, and now we have a single layer with our line work and our base painting. So now it's time to use the Sculpt brush. I like to use this at around 80 to 90% opacity. I've already mapped my number keys to my opacity settings. But if you want to do it manually, come up here to Window and just come over here to Tool Property. Open that up. And I'll just drag this out so I can close up that menu again, gain a little bit more space. And you can see when I hit the number 4, the opacity on my brush setting goes to 40, 50, 60, right? I'm hitting the number 8, it goes to 80. You can check out my other tutorial on how to map those. But once they're mapped, it's really easy to change the opacity. Now, if you don't see the opacity settings on any given brush, the Sculpt brush should come in with the opacity setting already enabled. But if the opacity doesn't show up on something like the oil paint flat brush, for example, just go into your tool property palette, go into the settings, find the opacity setting, which is under ink, and then just turn that eyeball on. So the eyeball exposes that setting in your tool property kind of as a shortcut. So these are just some of the most used settings from the subtool detail. All right, so I'll close that off, and I'm going to close my tool property palette because I don't need it. I'm just using my keyboard shortcuts. Coming to my Sculpt brush, and using the Sculpt brush at 100% is pretty aggressive. It pretty much just kind of gets rid of all detail, but I like to use it around 80 or 90%. So I'll hit the number 8 to come down to 80, and I'll just start kind of bringing these forms in and out. The way this Sculpt brush works is it kind of drags the source color into the destination area. And it also gets tinted a little bit by the color that's being shown in the color wheel. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick this color that I kind of want to sculpt with, and I'll just kind of, you know, blend those shapes together. It's a real fun process of kind of color picking and blending. What I'm looking for is a series of hard and soft edges. So for example, here's an example of a nice kind of soft edged area. And then these shapes are a little bit harder there. I'm going to drop it down to 60%, so I'm hitting the number 6, and that'll give me just a less of an aggressive approach to that sculpting effect. Going back up to 80%. Adjusting the size. I like kind of just getting rid of that that pencil work at some point with this little sculpting process. Picking that local color. And I will be coming back in again with the brush for some of the smaller details. If you hear that other little sound, I'm using my Alt key to pick up that local color. Imagine you're sculpting this out of clay. That's what it kind of looks like. That's what it should look like. Big forms first and then small details. Kind of bringing those colors in and out. Going down to 30%, just getting a nice soft turn on that. Okay, good. I'm gonna go back to my oil paint flat brush and maybe start redefining some of the smaller details here. In fact, I'll grab that color, that dark shadow, and now we can start putting in some nice little darks in there. These little nooks and crannies are what 3D artists refer to as ambient occlusion. It's where all the ambient light is occluded. It's pretty straightforward. So it gives opportunities for these shapes to really overlap. Grabbing that local color, let's go bright for the nail bed. Make that nice and small. In fact, I'm going to grab that local color again and just warm that up a little bit. And this is just meant to be kind of a, an overall sketch here. I'm going to go a little bit darker, hit that little corner. Local color. Grabbing that, grab my sculpt brush again, and pull out that shape a little bit. Soften that edge. Going up to 90% on my sculpt brush, picking that local color. Come back with my oil paint flat brush, and I'm going to start hitting some of these highlight areas. So let's go a little bit brighter. Hit that little patch in there. Come back in with the sculpt brush. Just hit that edge. Oil paint flat brush. Go brighter. Remember, the highlight area for one spot may not be the same exact hue as it is for another spot. So I'm just always grabbing that local color, bringing that up again. Laying that in, grabbing the sculpt brush, and then hitting my edge. Get that nice change between soft and lost edges, or found and lost, soft and hard. I hit that, grab my sculpt brush, blend that out. So you see I'm constantly just kind of going back and forth here, grabbing that local color. Let's get this little highlight in there. Drop that color in, sculpt it out. Okay, grabbing this local color, brightening it up. Grab that again, brighten it up. Hit that patch, kind of sculpt it out like that. Good, and I'm gonna get now, I'm just gonna go a little bit darker in this area here. In fact, I'm gonna saturate that up just a little bit. To get those shapes, lay that in, and then I can just take this and sculpt that out. Oh yeah, I have this one called Sculpt Texture, and it adds a little bit of that canvas texture in it, so let's go ahead and use that. Why not? 70%, a little bit less aggressive there. Just pull that out. Maybe something like that. Looks good. Bring these colors in like this. Yeah, it's almost like, it really is, it's like you're pushing clay back and forth here. Okay, quickly I'm going to grab the oil paint flat brush and just grab some white, and let's give ourselves a nice vignette here. Come down to 40%. 70. See how helpful having those keyboard shortcuts is in there. You can just really quickly adjust your opacities. I do tend toward more bold angular shapes. That's just my drawing style. But definitely express it how you like it. Great. Yeah, that's a nice easy little vignette there. Something like that. I'm going to grab my sculpt brush again and just kind of restate these little folds. Grab that white. Oh, I'm on my sculpt brush. Good. I'm kind of squinting my eyes a little bit just so I can see where these little highlights are. So let's just add a few more final highlights up here. Yeah, I'm going to soften up a couple of these edges with my sculpt brush. Just kind of soften that up a little bit. And the other nice thing about the sculpt brush too is I can take a color, an existing color like this, and clearly if I paint in there, it's just going to paint on itself. But if I want to just subtly kind of tone in some of that gray, if I paint very lightly here, not much will show up, but the harder I press, you know, more of that source color is going to show up. So I'm just going to kind of slowly gray those areas up. Grab that, gray it out, just get some of those cools in there. And let's get a little bit of that reflected light here. So I'm still on my sculpt brush, and it's just going to very slowly kind of lay that color in. Something like that. Yeah, it looks good. And let's add a little bit of reflected light here, even though it's really not in the painting so much. In the reference material, I should say. Something like that. I guess we could go on forever here. One of the other nice things about this method of just kind of picking from local color is we can always decide to go more saturated on this. And all we have to do is add a tonal correction as well. So we'll come up here to the Edit menu, Tonal Correction, and Hue, Saturation, Luminosity. I've mapped it to Command U because it's the same thing as Photoshop. So I'll just hit Command U. And we can just saturate this up if we wanted it. Just a little bit like that. We can even tone it one way or another. Maybe something like that. And then I'll add just a few more bigger highlights here. Speculars. Don't want to overdo it. Pull those in. Make that a little bit smaller. Go even smaller. And lastly, I'll just grab that sculpt brush one more time and just kind of pull out these edges a little bit. Something like that. And okay, I could go on forever here, but this is just a quick sketch, right? Pull that little rim light in. I like to always come in and just kind of get rid of any overtly digital strokes. Not that you're trying, I know that sounds bad. I'm not trying to hide that this is a digital piece because digital is a medium in its own right. I just feel like some of those strokes can be so squared off that they're distracting is really what I should say. And that is an artifact of digital brushes for sure. Good. Yeah, and you can always come in here with like a nice chalky brush or a textured brush. For example, I have this flat ribbon brush, which has a really nice edge to it, especially when I go down to lower opacities. Something like like 80. So I can just kind of grab one of these colors and just add a little bit of texture to it. If we wanted, grab that Sculpt brush again, and that works with any textured brush that you have. Okay, well, I hope that was helpful. So basically what we talked about was, after developing a sketch that has some clear planar values, just dropping in big, large tonal planes, and then using some kind of blending brush like my Sculpt brush, or even some of the stock blenders that Clip Studio comes with, to really just start shaping those planes into volumes. All right, I hope that was helpful. And as always, happy painting. See you next time.